We had everything ready to go. We just needed to have a verifiable proof in writing. And what we had from her then was 60-some pages of sworn statement that this was the truth as to what happened. They walked that into my office very early. I stayed down there all night. Around 6 a.m., maybe even before 6 a.m., they walked in with the document. We then went through and verified and confirmed what we were about to print with what her statements were in the sworn deposition, and then we went with it. And we had about 4 pages of newsprint based upon what Dan Delp had done and what we produced out of that. Now, there were a lot of things that we had gathered also in relation to this. Documents that came out of the district attorney's office, documents that came out of the courts, that we had in hand that led to all kinds of additional questions. And in our opinion, this was just the start of an investigation, that there was much more that was going to follow after this. The impact of the report was rather stunning on the community because Dan Delp was viewed as an up-and-rising young star.
In the course of that investigative effort, whether through the affidavit of the prostitute or through any other sources, did information surface about what I'll call a sex ring in York, Pennsylvania?
Indeed.
Okay, and could you tell me a little bit more about that?
What happened in York County was in the early 80s, there was a court case that went before, at the time we were doing this story, he was a retired judge. And he had ruled at the time that masturbation was not a sexual act. And that law held until sometime in the 90s, when there was a case in Wilkes-Barre, I believe, that went to the state Supreme Court and they overturned his opinion. But what that did was it formed the basis for prostitutes, massage parlors of the ilk to get a real foothold in York County. And we discovered during this course of this investigation that there were numerous operations being run, and that David Ness was one of the small-time ones, actually. One of the bigger operations was being run by a guy by the name of Keeney, and we had discovered this because he wound up being arrested, and we went after the court records on Mr. Keeney, and we got documentation, and we had learned that approximately 1.3 or 1.4 million dollars had flowed through his prostitution business over the course of a year, and it became apparent to me at that time that prostitution alone could not have been creating this amount of money for his particular business. Now,
how did you develop that information?
Documentation. We found court records. After he was arrested, there was information that was available through the court system itself. They gave him a, quote, deal. One of the things that happens in this kind of business is that if they arrest somebody, if that person agrees to cooperate, they hold off on the actual court procedures. And apparently he had agreed to cooperate with them on this particular matter, and it was our belief that he must have agreed to cooperate on something larger. And what apparently was happening at the time was that they had made there was a federal case apparently going on in relation to money laundering, drugs, and prostitution, none of which the feds would confirm for us. But what happened was that Mr. Keeney wound up committing suicide and I use that term loosely, in a motel room in a little burg outside of Wilkes-Barre. And he committed suicide by stabbing himself in the chest. We found that very peculiar. We had checked around with some forensic pathologists to question them as to whether or not, how often that they encountered a suicide of this nature. And the best that we could come up with was a person that may have stabbed themselves multiple times. Never a case had surfaced of a single stab wound. The problem was it was a locked room mystery. He was locked inside in the motel room when he committed suicide, and there was no evidence on the video cameras or so on. But we were subsequently told by that all that could have been worked around. But we didn't. That was not the point of our pursuing of the particular story at this time. This was just another story that surfaced during the part of the process. The question that arose in our mind in relation to that was, how big was this whole sex thing, and was he in Wilkes-Barre because he had been called to testify before another federal grand jury, which was going on up there? Okay. Don't know. Never could confirm that one way or the other. Before he died, that's what I was talking about before, they had made this deal.
The deal, okay.
And the assumption was they made the deal because he was willing to testify against people. Now there were, you're taxing my memory here, but there were all kind of related incidents that we had heard about. We developed all kind of sources during this period of time, and there were sources that said that in Keeney's house they had all kind of videotapes. That were taken of people having sex with prostitutes. And that supposedly someone from the district attorney's office who was involved with the arrest showed up at that place, and there were certain things that were, quote, confiscated so that they weren't still left around as potential evidence. And it got extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Extremely interesting in terms of all of this stuff when Dick Parks wound up committing suicide.